It took us 3 months, ultimately. Lots of people working day and night in the lab to fix the problem. I posed this problem to Claude. I said, hey, what should we do to get unstuck? And just in 1 minute, one response, Claude actually just one-shotted the answer.
Hi, I'm Jonah. I'm the head of life sciences focused on partnerships and deployment here at Anthropic.
Hi, I'm Eric Kauderer-Abrams. I'm the head of biology and life sciences here at Anthropic. I'm focused on research and product development, and together we're trying to teach Claude to be a biologist.
All right, Eric, let's talk science. I'm really excited about this and also excited about the fact that Anthropic and, we're leaning into this space. And, maybe the place to start is just thinking about why the life sciences, why Claude, and what Anthropic brings to, what is already a really big ecosystem, but one that's moving really fast.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. So I'll start with why are we focused on the life sciences? And this goes right to the heart of our mission. I think it's something that a lot of people may not realize, but when we talk about the beneficial use cases of AI and all the amazing things that we can do in the world with the frontier AI that we're developing, actually the number one place that we at Anthropic are excited about applying it is within biology and the life sciences, right? If you read our foundational material and you talk to people in the hallway here, that's the primary area where we're really focused on delivering the beneficial impact. For me, that's been a super exciting thing to come in and plug into, is all of that pent-up energy and excitement to apply everything that we have to this space. And then starting to get more specific and talking about why Claude and how is our approach as Anthropic, maybe different from some of the other approaches that are out there. I think there are two things that come to mind. Jonah, you and I have talked a lot about this, but the first is that we're interested in building tools that empower individual scientists and enhance the experience of being a scientist, going about your life, doing all the work that you're doing, right? So we want to give people the same experience that software engineers have had of, having a brainstorming partner to work with and delegate tasks to throughout the process. We want to bring that to biologists in the lab and on the computational side. And so our initial focus is really about building tools that make scientists more productive and also make science more fun, right? Take away some of the grunt work that everyone would rather get out of and allow you to focus more on the creative high leverage side. So that's the first part. And then the second one is we're really focused not just on the really exciting early stage discovery problems, right? Molecule design and protein folding and these incredibly impactful problems that many people in the field have focused on. But we want to address the whole spectrum from early stage discovery all the way through development and translation. And so for us, that means breaking it down into the whole world of different tasks that exist in the space. Everything from drafting and reviewing protocols and debugging them to performing bioinformatics analyses and writing up your results in slides and papers and that sort of a thing, right? There's a whole world of tasks out there that are important, and we're taking a holistic view and addressing all of them.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time to think about science and maybe AI more generally. And there's this inclination towards what problem will AI solve for me? But the way that I think we're thinking about it, the way that you just really nicely described, and the way that in Machines of Loving Grace is maybe also thinking through that slightly orthogonal point, which is how do we change how we do science? And that will then impact solving structures and molecules and tissues and imaging, and starting to think through that world. So, with that in mind, maybe then to transition. So, we've seen the power of Claude. I think both of us have experienced this and the delight and the joy in doing science with Claude and its current capabilities. But then also now starting to think in the research group that you're leading and how we advance those capabilities. And so maybe for a minute, we can just chat a little bit about how kind of current capabilities and ecosystems and maybe even extended context through MCPs and life sciences start to create this base case, and then your thoughts on how we extend that and even push it further and what that starts to look like and take shape.
Yeah, totally. So we've talked about this a lot. I think that it's important to crawl, walk, run in this space, right? There's a lot of things about doing biology and having AI be useful in science that are different from having AI be useful.
It is the AI space. So maybe you like to use an old running analogy. You start fast, you pick it up in the middle, and you sprint home. So very little crawling, but just
exactly.
sprinting and then sprinting faster.
Sprinting faster than flying in a rocket ship. That's really right what we're going for here.
Yeah.
But the very base level is we need Claude to be conversant with all of the tools that scientists are using every day, right? And so there's a whole ecosystem of important tools and partners out there that we are integrating with, right? So we talk about Benchling on the, experiment administration, lab notebook side of things, 10x Genomics with Cell Ranger, right? An incredibly important platform for analyzing single cell experiments, and then PubMed, for example, for being able to query the literature, right? And so these are just three incredibly important partners in a much larger ecosystem. And so that base level is we need to make sure that Claude can talk to all the major sources that scientists are using throughout their daily work. And then I think the next level is we want to bring Claude to performing at the level of a superhuman research assistant that can assist you as a scientist throughout all stages of your project, right? From the early stage hypothesis generation, when things are more creative and you're reviewing the literature and you're brainstorming, to the experiment execution phase where you're drafting protocols and you're debugging things in the lab and even actually running those experiments in the lab, to the computational and data analysis side of things, right? When you're running your bioinformatics scripts, you're doing machine learning on top of that or some statistics, and you're presenting the results to colleagues or for yourself, right? And so here, this is where we've broken down tasks into all of those areas, right? And we're figuring out, all right, how do we evaluate how well our models are doing those tasks, and how do we rapidly improve performance in all of those areas. So we're making a big investment in doing that right now. And I think it's also important to say that we're not just doing this generically, right? Like in some ways, you can't speak of life sciences as one monolithic thing, right? There's all these different subfields within it. And we have a particular sequencing in mind where we like to think of it as consisting of this core of important tasks that are shared throughout many different fields. And then within that, there are different subdomains that are really important, right? And we want to address all of it. But we're really focused on starting with that core that's going to be useful throughout the whole journey.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I'm really ecstatic about with our current partners and, folks that are involved early on here to build this foundation, especially with MCPs, is, you mentioned 10x Genomics, you mentioned PubMed, you mentioned groups like Benchling, and then, Sage Bionetworks, BioRender. Kind of going back to that last point, it really demonstrates and hopefully puts to action the fact that it's not just solving a problem, but, in that group, you've got the literature, you've got instrumentation, you've got analytical workflows, you've got the cherry on top with that like perfect image or, network diagram and BioRender. And I expect that over the weeks, months to come, like that whole ecosystem is just going to grow exponentially. And with that, like the power for more and more scientists. And I think that's just like incredibly cool and exciting.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because that's the experience that, a lot of us have had on the software side, right? For me, I've always been, on the one hand, a part of the software world, the other hand, a part of this bio world. And, things started on the software side where you'd give Claude, these little snippets of tasks, right? And over time, those tasks become longer horizon. Claude becomes more autonomous, can more seamlessly integrate through the different tools there. And I think we're right at that takeoff point in the life sciences where we're just now, with all of these connections that we're introducing, able to unlock that next stage where, you don't have to just ask Claude to go perform an analysis and then you do some work and then you come back and you make a biorender figure and you ask Claude to revise it, right? We could actually give Claude a whole, meaningful chunk of the work that would take a human scientist a couple hours to do. And I think that transition is the really exciting point in a field where it goes from being, a useful kind of utility to actually a brainstorming partner, right? Which is what I've had.
It's just kind of like embedded in the process.
And a collaborator.
Yeah. So we recently released Sonnet 4.5. A really exciting, super powerful model. And I think one of the things that we've seen, and eager to hear your perspective on the research side, is just like seeing how that model performs in the context of different areas of science. And so, what have you seen maybe in the evolution and the power of those models, and maybe some of the early evals or benchmarks that we've been seeing in different tasks that are relevant to scientists?
So I think there's two things about Sonnet 4.5 that I'm really excited about that have enhanced my own work by a great deal. The first is that it's our first model that's undergone extensive scientific training. Yep. So Sonnet 4.5, is skilled in many different domains of science, and I think one of the exciting things is that there's a lot there that generalizes, right? And so Sonnet 4.5 being better at math, has some effect of uplifting different capabilities in bio, especially on the computational side. And so I think it's just really exciting that it's our first, scientifically, really, really capable model.
Yeah.
There were some new things on the training side that went into making that possible that we're just leaning into and accelerating with all future models here. And the second thing is its ability to do long horizon tasks, right, consisting of long strings of different tool calls. So this is something that, for anyone that's done these sorts of long bioinformatics pipelines and things like that, is absolutely critical. We saw a major jump up in those capabilities with Sonnet 4.5, which makes it uniquely able to start to do these like really long bioinformatics workflows.
Yeah, I think in the analysis workflows and also thinking about how it applies to the different surfaces of Claude. So a lot of people think about Claude and they think the chat interface. But of course, I think for many scientists, maybe some that do, maybe some that don't realize this, the power of agentic coding tools like Claude Code or other places where that longer context and all of that power becomes really interesting for data analysis, for integration, for kind of like reasoning over different types of knowledge. And it's an incredible like starting point, right? Where then we can start to build.
Yeah, it really is. And I know this is one of the things that you and I have been the most excited about, that Claude Code is amazingly useful as it is today in biology, and most people don't realize that, right? It's called Claude Code. It's not called Claude Biology, right? But underneath the hood there's a really powerful general purpose agent that I, in particular, many people that we've talked to throughout the community have started to use in bioinformatics, even in things like drafting papers, right? And in performing literature reviews and organizing your projects, right? And so I think that's definitely something that we're going to be putting a lot more energy into.
Yeah, I mean, there's those moments, and as a technologist and someone that loves to develop technologies and apply them to biology, which is an affinity that I know we both share. There are those moments where you see technologies or kind of like experience technologies and you just like really feel them. And I still have that moment of like uplift, remembering the first time like playing with Claude Code and making tasks that are either kind of beyond my technical capabilities, tractable and manageable, or the tasks of just, like workflow running and execution that are just time intensive and cumbersome, trivial, right? I mean, it just like puts those tools in scientists' hands in a way that is incredibly powerful.
It really is. And, you mentioning those moments where you just viscerally feel, the new capabilities that are out there. That reminds me of that moment for me that really woke me up for the first time. And this was actually back in the Sonnet 3.5 days, that, wow, these LLMs and these frontier models are really relevant for what we're doing in the life sciences. And so for me, that moment was, at the time, I was running a biotech company that I had founded, and I had this idea that I wanted to try to see, hey, if I had had access to Claude when I was starting this company 5 years ago, how much time would it have saved us, and how much heartache in trying to navigate some of these really difficult R&D problems we were trying to solve would it have saved us? And I'll never forget this, because the very first huge technical roadblock that we ran into when we founded this company, there was a problem. We were developing an assay, trying to detect, in this case, COVID. And it wasn't working. We were getting inhibited by the sample matrix, and we couldn't figure it out, right? And it took us 3 months ultimately, and lots of people working day and night in the lab to fix the problem. And I posed this problem to Claude. I said, hey, we're trying to develop this assay, and we're seeing that the sample is inhibiting things, and what should we do to get unstuck? And just in 1 minute, one response, Claude actually just one-shotted the answer and said, hey, I think you should add this much of this chemical, into the mix. And that was a really eye-opening moment, right? That here, in conversing with Claude, you're kind of talking to a distilled version of the totality of, scientific knowledge, right? And at the time, it was imperfect, but it's rapidly getting better.
There's always this tension, and I think scientists want perfection, right? It's something that we all kind of like strive for and want that specificity. But for a lot of the work that holds science back, protocol optimization, an imperfect but helpful answer is the sort of thing that we go to, the most trusted colleagues, where they might say like, I don't know but like this looks familiar, right? Like I've seen this problem at some point. They're those kind of like sage professors. They're the like super sharp student, down the hall. And again, it's not looking for perfection, but it's looking to get unstuck. It's looking to be helpful. It's looking to just like keep you moving and like towards discovery, which is what we're all looking for, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally. And I think the other area that really jumped out for me early on was, this is relevant later in the translation phase, is in the regulatory process.
Right.
So I've spent a lot of time writing regulatory submissions, going through those processes with FDA. And, Claude is really capable there. And I think there's a huge opportunity, both on the industry side and on the FDA side, to recognize that we have these tools that can, speed up the process on both sides and facilitate consistent standards across the board. I'm really excited about pursuing that, and I know people, across this whole industry are as well.
Okay, so let's stick on this for a minute. Within biology, within AI, maybe even if you take a step back from AI and think about just like engineering and technology, the life sciences, biology is this, frequent substrate where people get really excited about the idea of biology or how it's just like one step away from being like immediately programmable. So some of those ideas and intuitions I think we probably agree with. But I think in many cases, it's folks that are maybe more in love with the idea of biology as opposed to like really know what the life sciences, what regulatory frameworks look like. Let's talk a little bit more about your experience, our collective experience as scientists, and kind of like bringing some of that detailed knowledge to our partnerships, to our research efforts, and what those moments have looked like for you in the past, and how they're maybe like reading on to priorities or approaches.
Yeah, I think this is a really important and also pretty fun topic to talk about, right? In some ways, it's one of the oldest tropes in the space of the computer scientist, the physicist, the mathematician that kind of waltz into biology, right, and have all these romantic notions, and then, spend their first year in the lab and come out kind of shell-shocked and, in some ways, disillusioned of all the things that are possible, right? I think that, where you and I both are coming from in the way that we're doing things here is we know what life in the lab is like, and we want to solve the real problems that are the bottlenecks for this field, right? I will say that's my own background. I'm coming more at the computer side and the math side of things, and have picked up bio, over the years in being in the lab, and I'm not disillusioned. I really believe that we have the opportunity to massively uplift the capabilities of biologists in doing incredible, impactful research, and that with the tools that we have now, we're finally at that moment where all these things are possible. So I remain the same optimism that I had when I first got into this. And, I think all the experience in the lab has been really clarifying to help point out, okay, there are real problems here that are not pretty and that require lots of grindy work to get in there and disentangle. But I think we're now set up to make a dent in that. So, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I totally agree, right? I share that optimism. I do think that there are many people that don't always understand like how difficult science is, but also how important just persistence and the fact that, research, and I think this probably applies, down the clinical pipeline too. It's because it's so difficult, because there's so much knowledge that needs to be incorporated in every like step in debugging and the complexity of biology, whether it's that protocol optimization or data analysis. It's really hard to hold all that expertise, definitely in one person, probably not even in one group, and infrequently in one institution. And the result of that, and I think where, again, we provide a really powerful technology in Claude and a research assistant collaborator, is it starts to like bring more of that fluidity, right? It lowers the bar for computational analysis for folks that may not have that computer science background. It brings some molecular biology and optimization skills for folks that haven't spent their whole life, cloning and doing molecular biology. And then it also just like helps make discoveries transferable across fields, right? I was not trained as a neuroscientist. I used to love to go to neuroscience lectures, but would then have to like come back and either like ask a whole bunch of naive questions. But, seeing optogenetics for the first time, discovered in neuroscience, took way too long to get out to cell biology, to other domains. And I think the power of Claude, and Claude as a life scientist, is it starts to like address some of those core problems in biology, but also just starts to create that fluidity and start to break down walls and some of the parts that makes science hard. Right?
I totally agree. And the other thing I want to mention when we're talking about our outlook and our research roadmap and things like that is, we focused a lot on the meat and potatoes and eating our vegetables of, all of these practical tasks, right, that are really exciting, but more sort of surface level. I also want to call out that we're seeing an increasing trend in, the field focusing on these biofoundation models. Yep. These models that have savant-like capabilities on biological modalities, right? DNA sequences and protein sequences and being multimodal and expression data and all sorts of things. And a trend that's really interesting to watch is seeing, increasing number of papers come out over time that are demonstrating that these things that previously looked like you needed these specialized biomodels for, maybe you don't. And maybe actually with, really large frontier scale models like Claude, with the right type of training, we can start to develop those capabilities. And so I think we're all as a field at the beginning of just sort of working through that. But I think it's a really, really exciting trend to follow and that we'll be pursuing pretty aggressively.
Yep.
Right? Because I think having these savant-like capabilities in these biomodalities is really powerful for these specific biofoundation models. But to really make that accessible to people, you need to be able to interface it with language, right? And so I wanted to call that out as one interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point that, as the field progresses here, and by field here, I mean both, the field of AI, but also like many domains of the life sciences. And I think we're already seeing a whole bunch of really exciting, partners that are the AI native startups in the biotech space that are kind of taking some of these tools, as well as large pharma partners. And the way that the different pieces come together, right? So biofoundation models, general intelligence models, specific data sets, it's going to be fascinating, right? And I think a really exciting time. And maybe this also gets to the point of partnership, right? So starting to take those different pieces and like bringing them together and how we think about partnerships, maybe some of the early learnings or opportunities or partnerships that have been front of mind for you, or kind of a philosophy of like building this ecosystem?
Yeah, so the way that I think about it is we know what our North Star is. We want to enable the amazing world that Dario writes about in Machines of Loving Grace, in which, R&D throughout the life sciences is accelerated by at least an order of magnitude. We want to make that happen as soon as possible. And within that framing, I think about partnerships as we need to make sure that all the right pieces exist, right? Some of those pieces we're going to do ourselves, right? A lot on the model training side, some on the product side as well. But other pieces, it makes sense for us to just find the right partners and make sure that we're supporting as much as we can. And so when I think about the different types of partners, there's really important ecosystem partners, right? Like I would call out Benchling as one of those for us, where I think they have, the majority of working, bioscientists are using Benchling as how they engage every day with kind of managing and running their experiments and their data. And so that's really, important one for us to lean into. And I think there's a lot of exciting things that we'll be able to share soon that we're working on together. So that's one type of a partner. Another type is a partner that we want to work with, in which they're using what we're building to actually do science in,
right,
in a way that wasn't possible before, right? Whether it's doing more science per unit time, right? Getting more impactful results per unit time than they could otherwise, or making a type of discovery that wasn't possible before, right? And so there's a few partnerships that we're pretty excited about. I think one that's worth mentioning is with the ARC Institute. I know that you're thinking a lot about this as well. So would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the affinity that we both had towards Anthropic because of the unique features of the models, this like deep thinking. I don't think it's an accident actually that so many scientists have gravitated towards using Claude just, naturally. But then also Dario's vision, and I think the vision that we very much believe in, which is, our goal is to accelerate, right? It's 100 years of science that is possible in 10. That's bold, it's ambitious. But also I think the more you think about it and the more you think about what holds science back, it's achievable. And so I agree, within the life sciences and biology, I think the other thing that's unique is that it's an ecosystem that is incredibly continuous and fluid, right? The student that is in a lab and finishing their thesis one day is the founder of an AI native startup, the next, that is then like acquired or working with or advancing, major pipelines at, AI forward pharma companies like Lilly. And, that fluidity and thinking about kind of that entire partnership in that ecosystem, I think that's the beneficial deployment. It's all of science and achieving that. The thing that I'm really excited about, and maybe one feature you didn't touch on, is our AI for Science program. And this is really looking to put tools and Claude into the hands of scientists that have a bold idea or a big project, and they think that Claude can, be useful to solving that. And I think it's a great way to, power early stage discovery research. It's a great way for us to kind of lean into those partners and work with them closely and learn from them, and like start to just, keep drawing the aperture open and understanding, like in these early days, what is working really well, and, frankly, equally important, like what isn't working well. And, I think we both believe in the power, but also believe in the current imperfection. And so that opportunity to, work with scientists, accelerate their research, judge success based on, what their success is, their discovery, their acceleration, their time, and start to see where we're doing pretty well and maybe some areas where we just need to be doing a lot better.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that too. And I think that's such an important point, right? Like in this conversation, we've been emphasizing a lot of breaking the problem down into all these pieces that we're going to solve independently. But the most important part is when we put it all back together.
Yeah.
And scientists are actually using these things. How's it going and what are we doing, right? And so I think the AI for Science program is critical for us to get that feedback and be closing the loop with people that are using these things every day in the lab.
Right.
And so I am super excited about that. One other point that I think is really important to make that speaks to why Anthropic and why the experience of doing this within Anthropic is so exciting. It's such a perfect fit. Is that as we're talking about accelerating and enhancing capabilities, right? The other side of that is safety and the tremendous responsibility that we all have to making sure that we are improving the model's capabilities and releasing increasingly impactful products in a way that is responsible and aligned with our responsible scaling policy and best practices in the biosecurity community. It's something I care deeply about. I've worked in biosecurity for years, and I think that at most companies, right, there would be some tension between the impact and the commercial aims of making these models better in biology, right, and the safety and responsibility side of slowing down when we need to, and making sure that we're being careful and have all the right safeguards in place. But at Anthropic, we don't have that tension, right? That's our DNA as a company. I think that's so valuable here. It's also really familiar, to everyone in the life sciences, right? For people that are developing therapeutics and medical technologies, right? On the one hand, you have your product development arm and your commercial goals. And on the other hand, you have a quality management system, right? Which is a set of procedures and practices that govern everything you do in order to make sure that you're doing so safely, right? And so I think it's just such a natural fit, our approach here to AI of making sure that developing really powerful AI goes well and is done safely, and what needs to happen in the life sciences, right? And so that's something that I'm personally really excited about that I also think is a big part of who we are as a partner in this field.
Right, yeah, it's an assumption, right? Like we have to do that. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to scientists, we owe it to the world to take those sorts of questions really seriously. Yeah, and I think the other thing that I think about a lot is like at our core, at our DNA, we're a research organization. I don't think you can say that about all other AI companies, frontier labs, et cetera. But I think being a research organization allows us to engage with researchers, labs, other research organizations in a way that really creates kind of a shared sense of like ownership and goals and working together, right? Like we want to advance the technologies and see them put to the full purpose and power, and are really invested in seeing that forward.
Yeah, I think we're really lucky that that's the case, and I feel that very viscerally that so many people on our founding team and our leadership team and just throughout all levels and teams in the organization are scientists, right? Many by training, many by nature and disposition, and I think that you can feel that sort of in all the work that we do, it makes it so natural to just go out and get to work with other scientists and all these things.
Yeah.
And some, it's a little bit like, the monkeys are running the zoo, right? Where we have people that are so passionate about science driving the ship. And I think that it means that we get to have a lot of fun.
Yeah. But I think it also, it's a lot of fun, but also that appreciation for core questions like safety and understanding what the power is. And also core, questions about like, what are the right problems to solve? And, an appreciation for what makes science hard, what slows science down, if we need to make 100 years of progress in 10, what does that actually look like?
Right.
And, you can draw back the veil of science and, there are some of those things of just understanding the literature, right? Like you can spend all day, every day. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of scientists would probably love to spend all day, every day reading the literature. But like even then you'd get through, some small, tiny fraction of what was published or pre-printed at any given moment. So it's just impossible to keep up, right? But Claude can keep up. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit, maybe here at the end, about the future of life science work. And we've talked about bioinformatics and coding. We've talked about some clinical work and different work that has been like demonstrated by some early partners, and then maybe also just ways that we're thinking about like building this up and continuing to develop new partnerships, push the models towards greater capabilities. Where do you go when you start to think about the future?
Yeah. So when we start to think about the future, I think first we need to make sure that Claude has all of the foundational knowledge that any scientist in the bio world would have, right? So things like understanding protein structural biology, right? And being able to look at a molecule from organic chemistry and understand its structure and function, things like that, right? And so once you establish that base, then I think there's some really exciting places that we can go after that, where one of the ones that I really like to talk about and that I think is critical is Claude actually learning to execute experiments in the lab, right? I think in order to get to this world where we're all going, that needs to happen. And again, this is a problem that for so long, we've been making a lot of progress, maybe not as much as some had hoped for, right? In terms of this vision of automating the tedious work of life in the lab. But I believe that it's possible now. And I think that that's a really important area where we have to drill in and focus on. And I think, just pause for a moment as to what life will be like when we get there. It'll be incredible, right? We'll be able to go from talking to Claude about an experiment, to designing an experimental plan with Claude, to having Claude draft the protocols, and right, you can go back and forth on them. And then when you're ready, you can say, okay, now go run those experiments and I'll review the data in the morning. And so I think that's critical for closing the loop and enabling that acceleration that we're talking about. And the other thing that I think is a really important theme for our future research is in biology, as with any domain in science, we have the opportunity to learn directly from real data from nature, right? And so on the one hand, we do a lot of model training and learning on annotations that are created by humans and other data sets that are either curated or created by humans, right? But there is an opportunity here to really do sort of lab in the loop, active learning from high throughput biomeasurements. And the other reason why bio is such a good fit for that is we really, are every year on a scaling law of the number of experiments, right, per unit that we can do, right, in terms of the throughput of these systems. So those are two themes that I'm increasingly excited about, where, when you start thinking about how do we move beyond human capabilities in these tasks, right? At some point, we're going to saturate learning from human experts. The answer is to get the data from the lab.
Yeah, I think this is a great theme. And the other thing that maybe I would point to is I think there's still this huge overhang, if you will, in terms of like current capabilities and use. And one of the things that sticks out to me is like starting to get Claude in the classroom in basic training, like really, kind of implemented in a deep way, such that, many scientists are using Claude, and also that experience and the product, starts to have this very cohesive feel where Claude is that virtual assistant and that virtual scientist that is helping not answer a problem, but, answer any problem. All right, Eric, this has been awesome. I mean, it's always fun to talk science. Sounds like we've got a lot of work to do. So thanks for taking the time, and really looking forward to the future of Claude, life sciences, and pushing towards the frontier.
Yeah, thank you, Jonah. This has been a lot of fun, and we're just getting started.
We are.